So many of us grow up with a thirst for life and a curiosity when we're young. But many of us are not taught to be curious about the people and the ideas that challenge what feel true to us when we're adults. And yet, we often face ideas and people that challenge our beliefs. Because the reality is, people are different. There's a lot that we have in common as humans, right? But people are different. The way that we're raised, our upbringing, and our cultural values, our individual experiences, even our biology, shape us differently. And those differences make up who we are. They're a part of us, and they're important to us, but they can also divide us and separate us. It's really hard to understand those differences when we're not listening to each other. But training ourselves to be curious and to listen can help us bridge the gap between our differences without erasing them or minimizing them. Let me give you an example from my own life. So one of the first times I realized I was different from my parents was when I came out as bisexual at 15, and then again when I came out as transgender at 24. This was a hard difference for us to process together. My parents were realizing that I was somebody they did not expect me to be, and they weren't used to it. And I was realizing they were a lot more complicated than I thought. They raised me to accept difference and embrace it, and they didn't really embrace me being bisexual. And that really put a rift between us. It put a gap in an otherwise pretty strong relationship. But I remember one of the first times that I saw the relationship between my mom and I shift. It was a conversation where I chose to listen to her side of things instead of just telling her what I thought. It was one of those conversations where it's really simple at first, and then it all of a sudden turns into an argument, and you don't even know how you got there. But without even trying, my mom triggered me. She said the exact right words. She made me think she's not 100% supportive of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender issues, and I got really defensive. But when I realized I was on the defense and I was the source of this argument, I stopped this time. I stopped, and I took a deep breath. And I asked her a question. It wasn't a rhetorical, attacking question like, "Mom, why do you always do this to me?" It was a real question, and I really wanted to know the answer. "Mom," I said, "why is this so hard for you? I mean, it seems like you really want to understand, but it's hard. Why do you think that is?" And my mom was kind of floored by this question. She was kind of impressed because I had never asked her anything like this before, and she hadn't really thought about it. "I don't know," she said. I guess it was the way I was raised. We never really had this around us growing up." So that moment was kind of big for us. It released a tension and like a pressure valve that had been building up for years. My mom got to process something that she hadn't thought about, and I got to ask her something that I hadn't asked her in the 10 years since I had come out. And in hearing her share and be honest, I got to empathize with her and realize this is my mom. This is my mom, not some enemy. She's a real person. And my mom and I are still different from each other. We're still different, but now we're more connected. And being different doesn't have to keep us apart. But in that moment of curiosity, it didn't just come out of thin air for me. It came because I practiced. I got to practice being curious about others. And I was first exposed to this concept of genuine curiosity when I started volunteering and working with Vote for Equality to advocate for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender rights. And Vote for Equality is a project of the LA Gay and Lesbian Center. And the goal of this project is to increase support for LGBT rights and for us as people, while at the same time decreasing prejudice. And in the process, build a huge network of people who are skilled and experienced at advocating and working together. So when I got started, it was back in 2009, And we were actually going out and going door to door, having conversations about LGBT rights with people who were unsupportive and undecided. So we were knocking on people's doors, and they were against us often. Just months before, they had voted against our rights when marriage was on the ballot in 2008. So you might imagine we were a little bit scared, and we were nervous. This was a big challenge, but we were up for it because having over half the state vote against us was just not working. And so we were upset and we were angry, but we also knew there was a path to something better. And we all really wanted to be a part of building that path and making things better. So 5 years later now, we've had 2,000 volunteers going out to have these conversations with over 13,000 people in Los Angeles. And we also have thousands of those conversations on film, because in addition to going out and knocking on doors and talking to people, we have volunteers who've been filming our conversations, and voters have consented to talk with us on video. And all of this has meant we have been able to develop a model of having conversations that really works. We've studied the video footage and talked to each other and come up with a set of ideas that really make a difference. And we've discovered a lot about what works. One of the important discoveries that we had that was kind of surprising at first, but it's turned out to be really essential, is that what we've learned about these voters is oftentimes more important than what we've shared about ourselves. So their stories have often made more of an impact than our stories. And listening and being curious about them is often what's changed their mind about us. So to give you a sense of what this actually looks like, I want to show you a short video clip of a conversation between me and a voter named Clint. And it's back in 2010 in the San Fernando Valley. And this is a man who didn't vote on Prop 8 when marriage was on the ballot because he said he didn't want to get involved. But I learned very early in the conversation that he actually had a gay cousin who'd been with her partner for many, many years. So let's take a look. What's your cousin's name?
Her name is Jill.
Jill, okay.
Yeah.
And Jill's been with her partner
And
for
partners.
20 years.
And they were both married before.
Yeah.
To men.
And have you interacted with them much as a couple?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I hadn't talked to her in like 30 years, and I called her.
Wow.
And we're in contact all the time. We visited. It's like that has almost basically nothing to do with anything. We're just human beings.
Right. And have you talked to them about this issue? Did they want to get married?
You mean them? Yeah, they would.
They would like to get married. Yeah, and
I'm not. That's what's so weird. I know I'm being hypocritical here, but that's. Hey.
I guess I'm just trying to, make some of the connections. So it seems like Jill would be real happy, right, if she could get married.
They'd like to, especially they're going through financial troubles.
Yeah, it's helpful.
And I believe this stuff. See, I get emotional about this.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Well, it seems like it's really hard decision.
Well, when it comes to health issues and stuff.
What? Just curious. Why does it, make you feel so emotional?
Because right now they can't do things for each other.
Yeah. That's gotta be really hard. And I
Sorry.
You how much you love and care for them, and you've got a wife. What's your wife's name?
Jackie.
Jackie. And how long have you and Jackie been together?
Married?
Yeah, married. Well, how long have you been together?
37 years.
And how long have you been married?
I think 19.
19. Okay,
so better know.
Yeah, I know, right?
No dinner tonight.
So, we were together for a while before you got married, and
16 years.
Yeah. What was it that made you guys decide to get married and to take that step?
She said, "Hey, dude."
Yeah. Let's do this. Yeah.
And I said, actually, I didn't want to marry. I just thought, what's the big deal?
Right. Yeah.
To me, but since we have been married, I realized the difference.
It is a big deal to you now.
It's a big difference.
Yeah.
See, now you're making me think about what
on
your side.
So I don't know if you could start to hear, he's starting to realize there's maybe a disconnect. You start to hear that? And as he's making this realization, he starts to get really emotional. And he actually cries in front of me. This voter, the stranger who I just met moments before, starts to cry. And he says at the end of the conversation, now you're making me think about voting for it on your side. So I've really, by asking this man questions about his real experiences with the gay people in his own life and about his marriage, I've helped him start to process something that he hadn't processed before. And he's really making these personal connections. And what he thought he wasn't so involved in, he actually realizes he really is involved. And there's nothing I could have said to him in this conversation that would have evoked as much emotion as what he was sharing about his own life. And after having these conversations for many years now, I've come to understand that people aren't thinking about this as much as I am. When I walked up to Clint's door, I'd been thinking about gay and transgender issues for about 10 years or more. So I had a little bit of a head start on processing my feelings about this. And in general, growing to accept a new idea takes time, and it's a process and a journey. And sometimes forgiving people for being exactly where they're at on their journey creates the space for them to move forward. And sometimes we get lucky, like we did with Clint, and they actually do move forward, and they get closer to where we want them to be. And it's being curious and listening to them that allows us to meet them where they're at. And even though it's hard to meet people where they're at sometimes, we have to do it. With Clint, I was pretty upset when I talked to him and realized he didn't vote on this, but he had a gay cousin. But instead of telling him he was wrong or that he hurt his cousin, I took the time to learn more about him. And doing that really made a difference. So stepping outside of my bubble and learning about this man helped him process. And meeting people where they're at doesn't mean we have to give up on what we believe in. It doesn't mean we have to agree with everything that these folks say or even like what they say. But it just means stepping away for a moment and trying to see their side of things. And in this conversation, when I did that with him and when I showed him some empathy for being where he was at, he was able to get to something that was really deep and difficult. And like I said, he cried in front of me, this stranger. And it was creating this space for him to be exactly right there that had him go through that process right in front of me. And it allowed me to guide him through it and internalize it. And internalizing it is so important because the goal we have in these conversations is to shift people's worldview about LGBT people, not just change what they say when we're around and we're listening. Clint, before this conversation, would have said, yes, I love and I support my cousin Jill. But when it came down to it, he did not go and vote for her. And he didn't vote for her ability to marry the person she loves. So when we're having these conversations, we are out for something much bigger. We want people to change the way they think and behave and the way they treat us, and with these voters, the way they vote on our rights. So after having a lot of conversations like that one and seeing how well it was working, we came up with a way to describe this to our volunteers and help them replicate this. So we created a marriage conversation recipe. And just like in an actual recipe, you've got utensils and tools that mix everything together, and you've got ingredients. And in this recipe, the tools are genuine curiosity, active listening, and open sharing. And when you use these, the goal is to make a real, genuine connection with folks based on real lived experience. So your ingredients here have to do with you and the voter. And with the voter, you're uncovering their real lived experiences with marriage and love and relationships and commitment. And you're sharing your own experiences with marriage. And you're asking them questions and learning about their real lived experiences with LGBT people. And you're sharing your own experiences, whether that means coming out and saying, I'm gay, or talking about your friend or your family member that really matters to you. And this process, mixing all these ingredients together, really has worked to impact the way people view us and our rights. And it's the kind of thing that puts this in a personal context. So it means that when we're sharing our stories about ourselves, they land in a real place for this person, and it feels more personal to them. And essentially, this is something you could apply to the other issues that matter to you. So you got core ingredients, right? You and the other person. And in your case, you might substitute the voter with your mom or your cousin or your neighbor. And those other circles are filled with the issues that matter to you. Whether they're social justice issues or just a deep personal conflict you're having with somebody that you love. But when you can make a real connection based on real lived experiences and values, you have a real chance to understand each other and to shift the way that people see you and the issues that matter. Well, it can be really difficult to listen to the people who see things really different from you. It's ultimately worth it. And taking the time to meet people where they're at helps us understand each other. And if we're really intentional, we can also shift people's worldview about us. But it's really important because who we are matters to us, and our differences are important. Listening and being curious allow us to stay true to ourselves and also stay connected to each other. Thank you.